Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Lifelong Learning Committee of Perth and Kinross Council on the 3rd of November 2021. Particularly I'd like to welcome our non-elected members of this committee and officers to the meeting. Can I advise everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed and is also will be available on the YouTube channel via the Council's website following the meeting. Can I ask Linda Brown if there are any apologies or substitutions for today's meeting, please? Linda.
Convener, we have apologies from Councillor Purvis and Councillor McCall is attending as a substitute today.
Thank you very much. Can I also ask you, Linda, to take a roll call of those attending the meeting, please?
Thank you. Good morning. When I call out your name, can you please indicate if you're present? Councillor Barrett.
Present.
Jack Bell. Jack Bell. Right, we'll come back to that. Councillor Liz Barrett.
Present.
Mr. Andy Charlton. Come back to Mr. Charlton. Councillor Forbes.
I'm here.
Mr. Martin Gowrie. Come back again. Councillor Massey.
Present.
Mrs. Macaulay.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. McBride. Councillor McCall.
I'm here.
Councillor McDade.
Present.
Ms. Theresa Moran. Councillor Pover.
Present.
Councillor Rebecca.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Sarwar.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
Mrs. Weston.
Present.
Right, we'll go back to some of the non-elected members. Mr. Jack Bell. Mr. Andy Charlton. Mr. Martin Gowrie. And Miss Theresa Moran.
Linda, for the record, Councillor Duff present also.
Oh, I so apologise, Councillor Duff.
That's okay.
Sorry, Councillor Duff. Well, there seems to be a bit of a difficulty again with the non-elected members, Convener. It may be that they're having difficulty getting it in to the meeting today. I don't know.
Thank you, Linda. You'll notice in the chat that Sheena's put some information about the young people representatives, so we'll get that addressed following the meeting. And Councillor Simpson, you've put a C in the chat.
If I may, Convener, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record. I've mentioned this before, but it's most unfortunate that there seems to be a lack of lay members. One of the many good things about the Education Committee and Lifelong Learning Committee has always been the contribution by lay members, and that makes a huge difference to working of this committee. And I'd like to have perhaps an assurance that we can set up some sort of forum or briefing or training to help lay members join, or find out if they're unable to do so, if they can provide a substitute or somebody else, because there's no alternative to having some real people contributing to this committee, as well as council officers and ourselves. And it's a great disappointment. No offence meant to those that are here, I might add, Convener, but it's a great disappointment there are so few. So I think I would like us to consider setting up some sort of training or IT forum and checking that they still wish to be members, because it's very unfortunate we have this at the start of every meeting, that there are certainly more not here than here. Thank you.
I would agree, Councillor Simpson. I'll take an action with Linda Brown to have a discussion with people after this meeting. I guess not everyone's perhaps as familiar and comfortable with the online format as we've all come to be. That may be something to do with it, but we'll progress that after. Councillor McDade, so you've also got a comment.
Yes, I'm aware that Mr. Charlton has been trying to join for a number of committees and has been unable to, and he was planning on attending today, so I assume he is continuing to have technical issues, and I'm wondering whether we can maybe get some IT support to Mr. Charlton and also make contact with other lay members in case they are also trying to join and have IT issues. Following on from Councillor Simpson's very valid point, I don't think, given that they usually have quite a good attendance, it's probably more likely that they're having tech issues with Teams rather than not wanting to be here.
Yeah, if committee services, I don't know if there's anyone that can action that during the meeting, or I'll leave that to you anyway. Thanks for that, Councillor McDade and Councillor Simpson. Jackie, you've got a comment?
Thank you, convener. Yes, I was just going to make a comment in relation to the attendance and membership of our young people representatives, and we'll commit to taking action away from today to raise that with staff within services for young people and ensure that we've got appropriate representation and people following through and succession for the young people who are moving on and no longer able to commit to lifelong learning committee, which is appropriate. But I think it would be helpful if I do that exploration and provide an update or certainly a solution to the committee next meeting of the committee. Thanks.
That's very helpful. And to Mrs. Weston and Mrs. Macaulay, you're very welcome following all of that. Thank you very much. We'll take action on those points that have been raised. Moving on to declarations of interest, can I ask if there's any declarations of interest in respect of business on today's agenda from the elected members? Not seeing anything. I'll take that as a nothing then. And item 3 is the minutes of previous meetings. Can we agree the minute of the meeting of the Lifelong Learning Committee of 25th of August 2021?
Agreed.
And can we also please note the minute of the meeting of the Joint Negotiating Committee of 15th of June 2021?
Noted.
Thank you. That takes us on to item 4, which is the Education and Children's Services Joint Business Management and Improvement Plan 2021-22 and Annual Performance Report 2020-21. I'll invite Sheena Devlin, the Executive Director, to introduce the report. Please, Sheena.
Thank you very much, convener, and good morning, everybody. This report presents the Education and Children's Services Joint Business Management and Improvement Plan 21-22 and also the Annual Performance Report for 2021. It provides a broad and balanced view of service delivery and performance across the whole of education and children's services during a year of significant challenge and outlines an ambitious improvement agenda for the forthcoming year ahead. There are a range of officers here who will be happy to assist in answering any questions that any members might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sheena. Can I ask if there are any questions on the report, please? I note that Councillor McCall.
Thank you, and my apologies if this has been spoken about. I've got a couple of questions, convener, if that's okay, and apologies if this has been spoken about previously. Being a stand-in on today, a substitute, I don't want to.
Can I just, Councillor McCall, if possible, could you do one? Yeah. And then we'll come back once, because there'll be other questions as well, and I'll come back to you, I promise.
Happy to do that, convener. Thank you. Okay, so the first question, I'm looking at page 27 on the report, which mentions the fact that we were all up and ready and rearing to go with 100% on the 1140 hours in February, which was fantastic. But I was wondering if I could get a little bit of an update on what the uptake was. Did COVID cause an issue regarding that? And can I have a little bit more information on the uptake on the 1140 hours, please?
Convener, I can confirm that we were able to meet our requirement of providing 1140 early, and unfortunately Ben Scott, who is our service manager early years, is not at work at present and not here, so I'm wondering if either Sharon Johnson or Annie Carr has to hand the information about actual uptake. And if not, Councillor McCall, we will provide that to the whole of the committee at a point after this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheena. I can answer that question, Councillor McCall. As the Executive Director stated, we did implement 1140 hours by February of this year, and in fact had gone some way to implementing it before February. There were some delays, and that was around the capital programme, and that was absolutely due to COVID. In terms of uptake, the uptake continues to be high. The patterns of attendance are still very much weighted around term time attendance, and we still have, and we've had an increase in our uptake of Strong Start 2s, which we've been working on for quite some time. So we have also continued to survey our parents and to promote the different patterns of attendance that are available now for early learning and childcare. And we are looking at the information that we've recently received from parents just to look at how we can further enhance the flexibility options that are available to parents. If you've got any more specific questions, Annie Carr, Quality Improvement Officer, is here to answer any of those more detailed questions. Thank you.
No, that's excellent. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thanks, Ros. I'll come back in for your further questions once we've gone round the others. Councillor Barrett, followed by Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Convener. Mine also relates to early years. I understand there are some recruitment difficulties being experienced and loss of staff in school nurseries because early childhood practitioners have moved into other jobs during the pandemic, and probably for the 1140 hours as well. How much of a risk do you see this to delivery going forward for the plan?
Convener, I know that Sharon will want to come in and answer on that. Councillor Barrett, could I just ask you to clarify that you said that there was a shortage in terms of staff in council nurseries?
This is in school nursery. Yes, the nursery, the nursery part of primary schools. I came through in a parent council recently.
It may be that there's a localised issue, but there's not a general issue at all with recruitment in this sector in the council. But Sharon would be able to give you more information about that. That's why I just wanted to check that you were asking about school nurseries, because that's not our current experience. Thank you.
That's reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheena. Councillor Barrett, we have had, as you well understand, a doubling of the amount of staff that we've needed over the last few years, and we've been doing very well in Perth and Kinross in terms of recruitment to our local authority nurseries and indeed to our partner nurseries. What we have done also, though, is to recruit some additional roles within early learning and childcare. So we've recruited an additional 25 ECPs as family workers within nurseries, and that has increased the role of the early learning and childcare workforce quite significantly. And we've also increased the number of ECPs working in primary 1 to establish and support the impact of COVID and the importance of play in primary 1 classrooms. So we've used some additional staffing monies to increase the cohort of ECPs overall within early learning and childcare, and that did result in some movement and some shortages short term of staff, as the Executive Director said, in localised areas. Recruitment is an issue, as is the experience of practitioners, but we are really well on our way to making sure that those additional staff that are not required for 1140 hours are in place in our primary 1 classrooms and indeed in our nurseries as family support workers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sarwar, followed by Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. My question is from the appendix under health and wellbeing, and specifically our priorities for 21-22. I'm really interested in the Scottish Government's health and wellbeing census, and I just wondered if we could have some more information on how that's going to be delivered, what the timescale is like, maybe the format, and specifically if we know how it's going to be used and if we would receive the outcomes of that census. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sarwar. I know that Fiona Mackay is on the call, and she has been very much involved over a long period of time, along with Paul Davidson, with colleagues in Scottish Government, framing up the health and wellbeing census, because as you know, we have quite significant experience in terms of large-scale surveys gathering children and young people and indeed families' views on such matters. We have agreed to participate in this census, and we've been working with our schools to notify them of the timescales of when this will take place. We are asking schools to support young people participating in the census whilst they're in school, but there are other means for young people to do this as well. And where we have sufficient data that is able to be provided at a school level that ensures you know the word I'm trying to say, I just can't say it today, keeps everybody anonymous, that's what I'm trying to say, then we would get that, but we obviously wouldn't get any data or information that would potentially identify individuals or small cohorts, and we'll certainly be able to get information at an authority-wide level, because the whole point is of using surveys like this, we need to then know what's being said so we can then inform our future improvement planning. But Fiona will know more detail about timing and the rollout of this, so I'll hand over to Fiona if that's okay, and hopefully she'll not stumble over her words just as I have.
There's no guarantee, unfortunately, Sheena. Yes, we're looking and working at the moment with our secondary schools to roll out the survey over the remainder of this term, so from mid-November through to before the holidays, and with primary schools we're looking at a timescale in February. And that's just to ensure that we're not overlapping with some of the other demands that are within our schools to be completed. In terms of the content of the surveys, they cover a very wide range of topics. The topics will vary depending on the stage that the young person is at as well. For instance, there will be some questions asked of secondary pupils that will not be asked of primary, and we can provide I know Paul Davidson is planning to provide a more detailed briefing for elected members, because we appreciate that it will be an area that you may get questions from constituents about. The reports will come in a variety of forms, so we will hold the data at a Perth and Kinross level, so we have that information, but we'll be able to break it down, and as Sheena had said, we'll only be able to break that down for reports to schools to a level where it does mean that children and young people are not being able to be identified as individuals. But as our experience in the past with evidence success was that we were able to provide a really good range of useful information for schools that allows them to plan at their level, as well as informing us at a Perth and Kinross level about what services and supports that we need for our children and young people going forward. And we'll obviously want to work with our partners in terms of some of that provision as well, because this is about health and wellbeing. So our health partners will be particularly interested in some of the information that comes back. If there's anything further, please let us know, and we can look to provide a separate range of information by email.
Thank you.
Sheena, you want to come back in on that?
Yes, if I may, convener, thank you. Just to say that the briefing, I'm just double checking, it will be planned for later this week, for release for later this week, Councillor Sarwar. So the briefing that Fiona mentioned there for elected members, it's imminent.
Thank you, that's great and really interesting.
I think just on that point, I think we have valued the briefings that officers, particularly in relation to the papers for today's meeting, they've been really, really helpful actually, and allowed a lot of questions to be asked around, getting right into the nitty-gritty of some of the papers. So we've appreciated those, and thank you to those that have made the effort to come along to them. Councillor Forbes, followed by Councillor Massey, please.
Yeah, thanks, convener. My question is quite a general, wide question, and it's on the page range round about 24, 25, 26 and so on. It's about targets. And obviously, because of COVID, a lot of the targets haven't been met. Some of them have actually gone up the way, but a lot of them have gone down the way. Presumably, at some point, you'll have to have a look at those targets and regrade them for the future. So just as one example, I'm looking on page 26 at the number of young people achieving awards. Performance 2019, 442, dropped understandably because of COVID down to 324. So the jump to the target of 600 is much greater than it would otherwise have been. So will you be looking at all of those targets and reprofiling them?
Councillor Forbes, there will be a requirement to review to see if targets are still appropriate, relevant, required to be amended. We will expect in some areas, and the one that you highlighted there, for example, we know will have been a particular miss for a range of young people, and what we would hope to see is perhaps an increase in terms of young people who may wish to participate in those kind of activities. But yes, there will need to be a review in relation to any of the targets that we consider that would be inappropriate. It would be fair to say, Councillor Forbes, that we review our targets anyway on an annual basis and consider whether, you know, if we keep setting a target and, for example, always exceeding it, then there's a question mark, isn't there, about how relevant that is. But likewise, if a target is way too stretching and we're always far away from it, then likewise we would be reviewing that as well. So targets are something that we keep under review, and there'll be a particular close look in relation to considering the impact that the pandemic may have had on those.
Thank you for that. I think I'm aware that there were a number of Perth and Kinross young people out over this past weekend doing their Duke of Edinburghs. From personal experience, I'm aware of that, but I also saw some signs up at various halls for Perth high schools. I think it was Perth Academy, Duke of Edinburgh, sort of rendezvous point. So congratulations to all those who took part. And I know it's been particularly difficult for staff in schools that are leading those groups through the current circumstances. So appreciate the efforts they've gone into helping those young people to achieve those goals and aspirations, particularly in the weather we had this past weekend. Councillor Massey, followed by Councillor Simpson. Councillor Massey, you get the prize for the first person to be on mute this morning.
I'll have to start again then, unless anybody can lip read. Sorry about that. Right, thank you, convener. My question is on page 47 of our pack, care and equity. It's where it says preparing for young persons guarantee to start on the 1st of April 2021, and it also says that this will enable us to target our most vulnerable young people. From my reading of the Scottish Government Young Persons Guarantee Scheme, the guarantee will ensure everyone aged between 16 and 24 has the opportunity of work, education or training. Can you give me more information on this scheme? How much money did the Scottish Government provide to Perth and Kinross for this scheme? And you have started 3 new positions. Do you have any updates since the 1st of April when these people started?
Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Massey, and I know that David McCluskey is on the call and would be able to pick up on some of that information. And again, if there's some of the detail that we don't have to hand today, Councillor Massey, we'll ensure that that is provided thereafter. So David's on the call and he'll be able to pick up on that. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Sheena, and thanks very much, Councillor. Yes, absolutely. So this is an area of concern, obviously, for us, and always has been, in terms of ensuring sustainable, positive destinations for young people. In terms of young persons guarantee, Scottish Government have now funded a DYW coordinator in every one of our secondary schools. So we have somebody who's funded to 0.5 FTE, working with each secondary school to assist generally with that universal offer in terms of young people meeting those sustained positive destinations, but also as part of the partnership approach that we have to ensuring that every young person, including those facing greater challenge, indeed go into positive destinations. And that involves a whole range of partners and other colleagues from other parts of the council, such as economic development, for example, Skills Development Scotland, the DYW board, partners in local business and industry. It's a complex and multi-layered picture that we have here. And it is something. It's a major part of our work because it's part of the national improvement framework that we're setting in education. So as I say, it's been a long-lasting part of where we are. In terms of the figures for as we're moving ahead this year, we've been working really hard to ensure that every young person who left school in 2021 is going into a positive destination. Our figures in September, we're looking at 95.8%. But work went on, targeted work with the 57 young people who at that stage didn't have a positive destination, including the partners I've already mentioned, to ensure that they did move on to employment, education or training thereafter. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
It certainly has. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rebick, and then if there's no further first questions, I'll call you back in, Councillor McCall.
Thanks, Convener. It's just a broad question, really. I think this is a really good report. There's lots of great information in here, and it was a good read. So thank you for that, first of all. I certainly get the impression that, and my question, I guess, is, am I right in my impression that whilst there's lots of good work, quite rightly, done for people that need help here for whatever reason, there's a lot of effort and money going into closing the attainment gap and making sure everybody gets an equitable education, as it were. But I also get the impression, I think, that there's still a lot of work in terms of striving for excellence right across, and that people are challenged from whatever level of achievement that they're at, that they're challenged still. And I get the impression from this report, I think, and I'd quite like it to be confirmed, that actually not only is there not only are we striving for equity, but we're also striving for excellence, I guess, is the way I'm putting it. Thanks.
Councillor Rebick, you're absolutely right. There's, if you like, those twin tracks of excellence and equity, and then they come together with the phrase "for all." Now, it's easy to say and it's harder to achieve, but it's certainly the intention and the ambition of the tenacious workforce across all aspects of education and children's services, where every single person makes a contribution to that for our children and young people. And we're absolutely clear that, you know, improving excellence for all, or rather achieving equity for all, is not about curbing excellence, but it's absolutely about striving for both of those. And I'm pleased that that strong message has come through in the improvement plan. So thank you for that. We'll be sure to pass that on to colleagues across the teams.
Not at all. If you'll indulge me for 30 seconds longer, Convener, I just want to echo what you were saying about the briefings last week. They were excellent, informative and very useful. If I can make one small request at this point, out of necessity, I guess, the briefings were all in days which were working days for most of our group. And to use Lewis Simpson's phrase, I'd like to think our group in this committee are normal people, because we do have jobs in the real world as well. So it's just a polite request. If these briefings can be on Mondays and Wednesdays in future, it would be really helpful. It will make sure that we're able to attend even more than we already do. Thanks.
I would echo that, Councillor Rebick, and particularly I know that there were some members who are not on lifelong learning, but had an interest obviously in the issues, because it you know, crosses all wards, who attended in it, and it would be good to encourage more of that also. So I'm sure Sheena and her colleagues will do what they can to fit it into what is, you know, a pretty packed week for everyone. But I'm sure they'll try and accommodate that as much as they can.
That's really, I'm really grateful for that, Convener. I know it's difficult sometimes, it's not always possible.
Yeah. Yep.
But we're really useful, so, you know, thank you.
Apologies, Convener, if I may, we can undertake to record any future sessions, and we would then have those available. I know it's not the same as actually participating, but we could certainly undertake to do that with the agreement of everybody who would be participating in any of those briefings. And the only other thing I would say is that we absolutely do strive, Councillor Rebeck, to ensure that we provide those briefings on the usual days. The reality, of course, is that with the busy agenda, we were kind of fighting for space in amongst some of the other briefings that were being provided. And if we could knit some more Mondays and Wednesdays, then I think we'd be on to a winner for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I do appreciate that, and there was no implied criticism there, I can assure you. Thank you, though.
And just to reassure you, Sheena, your colleagues did record the sessions, so they were and are available, I believe. So that'd be helpful, and for the non-elected members of this committee as well, that who also are normal people, possibly even more normal, and just that they would be able to access them also. So it's a good resource as well. That's very helpful. Councillor McCall, we'll pull you back in for your additional questions.
Just the one, convener, I promise, and it'll be as brief as I can make it. I'm not known for my brevity. The question I have is on the health and wellbeing section in the BMIT. Time to pause, punctuation, the positive, etc., and the comment that's been made that the feedback from this is overwhelmingly positive. I was just wondering if officers could elaborate on that. I love the fact that it's overwhelmingly positive. That's great, but does that mean that the people who participated in it found it excellent, but there wasn't much of an uptake? Or is it providing some form of sustained engagement back into school, considering the issues we've had with the pandemic? So I was just wondering if I can have a little bit more information just on that sort of programme. Thank you.
I think we have our principal educational psychologist, Susie Turner, on the call today, and Councillor McCall, I think Susie's probably best placed to give you some of that detail that you're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, we've done a lot of work around attendance in relation to the pandemic. We have increased the support to the Community Link Worker programme, and they've been working closely with our schools and with partners to get alongside some of the young people that have been struggling to attend school, and that has been positive, both feedback from the schools and from the young people to date.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I know I'm being a little bit of a stickler, and if that's okay, convener, but I see a lot of kids suffering in various different ways because of the detachment that they've had over the 2 years and struggling to come back. And I'm concerned that it's only the people that are engaging that are finding it positive, but there's a tranche of kids that just aren't engaging yet. So I'm trying to get an idea of what the uptake is, if that's possible.
Yeah, we are still in the process of trying to best understand ourselves what some of the challenges are, but we have seen shifts in attendance. Some of these difficulties are quite complex. They require quite sustained working with families, but we are putting quite a lot of training. That's got a lot of multi-agency support going into that training, which is really good to see. And we've also done a lot of work at the universal level on our support for attendance to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that difficulties around attendance don't escalate. Yeah, so this is ongoing work.
Ongoing.
But
okay.
Work, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That was quite a wide range of questions and areas covered there. So thank you very much to all the officers for answering those questions. Moving on to propose the paper before us. Committee is being asked to approve this very fulsome report, which has already been considered by the Scrutiny Committee and will further be approved by the Housing and Communities Committee in relation to the section on criminal justice services. The BMIP and annual performance report is being presented with COVID-19 and the global pandemic as the backdrop against which our officers and staff. I think if everyone could mute, because I'm getting some feedback. Thank you. against which our officers and staff across ECS have worked over the period 2020-21 and continue through 21-22. Committee will note that at 1.4 in the report in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, an improvement plan for the 2020-21 year was not approved by Lifelong Learning Committee. When considering all of that backdrop, it makes the achievements across the service even more significant. Drawing on some of the highlights in the report before us, we see a budget commitment by this administration to deliver on the promise to support our care experienced children and young people to realise their full potential through developing community models and building on the success that we've seen with the REACH model of providing family support out in our communities. Our digital learning strategy has had to adapt at a rapid pace through the 2 lockdowns, and I would take a moment to again thank all those behind the scenes officers who work in IT across the council, without whom nothing would have been possible. You're the unseen heroes over the past 2 years, and we're still very grateful. We've seen the implementation phase of the Highland Perthshire Learning Partnership completed also as part of that. Teachers across our schools working with ECS staff successfully implemented the SQA alternative certification model, and we thank all our head teachers who pulled out all the stops to make that process as smooth as possible for our senior phase pupils. And finally, the section on pages 32 and 33 demonstrate the teamwork with our partners at Tayside Contracts and with the NHS to support health and wellbeing, everything from keeping our schools and buildings as COVID safe environments to supporting young people with anxiety and mental health challenges. And most importantly, the staff wellbeing framework, as we recognise without our staff being well and supported, we can't achieve anything. So with that, I'm delighted to propose this report. I thank all the elected members for the questions and the officers for their responses, and pass to Councillor Duff to second.
Thank you, Convener. The report highlights the breadth, depth and wealth of activity which has been undertaken during the year by Education and Children's Services. An amazing variety of work, much of it brought about in response to the unfolding COVID crisis, from establishing critical childcare and homeschooling to ensuring our vulnerable children were fully protected and supported, and developing strategies for everyone's emotional and mental well-being, and much more besides. What has been achieved during the year is, I think, a testament to the quality and commitment of our officers, staff and teachers, and I believe that they can look back at that year with quiet satisfaction, having done an excellent job in the face of some extremely challenging circumstances. Picking out some highlights, I would mention the fact that 100% eligible children, being able to access their 1140 hours early learning and childcare entitlement from February 2021, well ahead of schedule. As you mentioned, the successful implementation of the alternative SQA certification model, which must have been a considerable relief, no doubt, for parents, pupils and teachers. And moving the 2020 Keep Your Child Safe event online, attracting around 600 attendees and winning the Scottish Business Resilience Centre's award for the Outstanding Cyber Community event for 2021. Yes, there are always things we want to do better, and God willing, let's hope that we can, when we are considering next year's report, we can look back on a far less stressful and challenging 12 months. Convener, I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Can I ask if there are any comments on the report, please? Councillor Ribbick.
Thanks again, Convener. I'll try and be really brief, but it is also important to recognise the work of officers, head teachers, and indeed ECPs and PSAs as well. And what has been, as we've already discussed many times, a really challenging year. So it's important we recognise the work. It's also important that we recognise the work that Janice and catering staff and everybody else for that matter have been doing in these times, because schools need to be a place of care and love, even as they're places of learning, particularly as we're still in COVID and the post-COVID health and wellbeing issues. I think it's important that we recognise every single person that works in a school and tries to endeavours to make sure that they're places of calm and love, as well as excellent places of learning. I think it's important we recognise that. I think it's also important that we recognise how well officers have done in getting early years childcare expansion delivered in entirety by February 21. I think that's a remarkable achievement, and I hope we're able to recognise that today. It's important that we do I've prattled on many times about 1140 hours, but it will be truly transformational, I believe, for this country in terms of early interventions in work poverty, kids being right for school when they start, and not least in closing the attainment gap. So it's impressive that we've delivered that, and we've delivered it in entirety. It is really important. I think broadly speaking, and I know I'm concentrating on the education part of this report, but it is important also that we recognise that education will never be perfect. It can't be, by the very nature of it. It will always need to involve, it will always need to be better resourced, it will always need lessons learned, but I think we do deliver education in Perth and Kinross pretty well, and I think it's important that we recognise that and applaud the people that are delivering it well for us, whilst accepting that there's always the need to get better. But I just want to place my thanks on record to everybody, particularly over such a difficult period of time, that their efforts are appreciated, and it's important to recognise that actually, despite all the things that have happened over the last year and a half, we still deliver education pretty well in Perth and Kinross. So thanks, Convener.
Could get that as a strapline. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. I'm not sure how to follow that without sounding like I'm repeating it, but no, I just wanted to go on record to say that I think it's amazing when you read this report that just how well all sections of the education and on the social work side all come together and work as a massive team for the good of the children that are in Perth and Kinross. I always enjoy reading this report. We've had a challenging couple of years. I have alluded already to the health and well-being of our children. I think they've had a very difficult time trying to put up with the change in the way their schooling has taken place due to the pandemic. It has going to have many ramifications and knock-on effects for years to come. But I can read this report and feel comfortable that all is being done by a very talented group of people to make sure that we are ahead of the curve in this. So I just wanted to go on record to say thank you very much to everybody. Another excellent report.
Thank you for that, Councillor McCall. So with no further comments, can we agree the report, please?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
And that takes us on to paper 5, Attainment and Pupil Equity Funding Update. And I'll invite Sheena Devlin to introduce the report, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. This report provides an update on progress made in Perth and Kinross to raise attainment and close the poverty-related attainment gap. It provides an update on the initial year of the 2020 to 23 Raising Attainment Strategy and Implementation Plan, and it also has improvement actions contained in the Raising Attainment Implementation Plan 21-22. It outlines the range of measures implemented to improve performance and monitor progress of improvements, including the use of pupil equity funding to support children and young people. It meets the requirements to report on the National Improvement Framework for Education and on the expenditure and impact of the Pupil Equity Fund. A briefing session for elected members covering these topics in detail was held on Tuesday the 26th of October 2021, and that session was indeed recorded. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there's any questions on this report? Councillor Simpson, please.
Thank you. I got in quick this time.
You did, very quick.
Now, I'm an old man trying to be green, so forgive me, I can only get one page at a time up on my screen. I'm looking at page 76 and with referring to staying on rates, which I think are a key rate, because obviously once the young people are out with our grasp, there's a limit to what we can do to assist them in any way. And there's a very good result here. And I just wonder if we get a little bit of information on how we did it, and also perhaps on how much intervention we can take out with the school day. It's important to remember that the young people in our care spend more time in the care of others than they do in our care. So I think it's a good news story, but I think basically, how did you do it, Sheena? I think is my question. But,
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I'll ask David McCluskey to explain how we got to the position that we've got to with the staying on rates. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sheena, and thanks very much, Councillor. I think the key to ensuring that young people feel that there's an offer for them in school is providing that offer. So we've been working very hard in providing an appropriate curriculum for every young person that attends our schools. And that's a curriculum that's provided by the schools themselves, but also in partnership, for example, with UHI Perth College and growingly as part of the virtual offer, which is going to expand in years ahead. So I think that's a key part of what we do. And I think the other part of what we do is in terms of, and you touched upon that, in terms of the health and well-being of young people and the partnership work that we do, for example, with third sector agencies, and working with other colleagues in children's services to ensure that our schools are actually fit for the purpose of every young person that attends them. So we're pleased to see that improvement, but it's not the end of the road for us, and we know there's still a good bit of work to do in that to come. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Thank you for that, Lewis, and thank you, David. Councillor Ribbick.
Thanks again, Convener. Again, I'm just really asking a broad question about impressions I've got that when PEF funding started, I think in February 2015, I got the impression when I was first elected that the first year or two maybe there had been some uncertainty by head teachers and senior staff as to what it was for and how to spend it. But I think as time's gone on, the impression I'm getting from this report is that head teachers and senior staff are now really well switched on as to how it's to be spent, and that it actually does make a very direct difference to the lives of young adults, and that it does indeed at least go a little bit towards closing the attainment gap. But again, I'm wondering if those impressions are fair or not. Thanks.
Councillor Ribbick, thank you very much for that. When PEF was first introduced into Perth and Kinross, the amount that we received broadly equated to the amount of monies that was available to schools through their supplies and services part of their devolved schools management. So in grand scheme of things, significant amounts of money, and it was allocated, as you know, directly to schools, and therefore it was quite a different approach that was being taken in terms of this funding. And so you're right, it did take people a bit of time just to get used to this very different approach. What I would say is that the work that Sharon Johnson and her team have undertaken in supporting schools, thinking about the most judicious use of that money to have the greatest impact for as many children and young people as possible, has also been instrumental in ensuring that we are seeing true impact of that very significant resource where it's most needed. But as you've yourself reflected earlier on, we're never ones to sit on our laurels, and we actually think that there is still more that we can do in terms of targeting even more just exactly how PEF is spent so that it benefits. And this picks up on Councillor Simpson's earlier point about, children and young people actually out of their lives spend a very small amount of their time at school, and it's about considering the best use of PEF in the round, and that's about the widest range of professionals, third sector organisations and others who can actually help staff in school and ourselves make that important difference to children and young people. And that's really what we're looking to do, is to really sharpen up on that impact across the piece. So we hope when we bring the report next year, there'll be some more information about just the impact it's had. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that. I'm not seeing any further questions in the chat, so I'll move on to moving the report. If I can find my notes. Like to once again thank officers for the briefing session that they ran. It was really useful and gave members the opportunity to ask a lot of questions around the report. It's important to recognise the efforts of all our children and young people, and especially senior phase young people who've had an extremely difficult period over the last couple of years, when they would have gone into their 4th year, 5th year, 6th year expecting the usual cycle of exams and then had to adapt to a very different set of circumstances. Our young people should be very proud of their achievements, and also all those who supported them through the process, be that parents, carers, teachers and staff across our schools. Our commitment to raising attainment is to raise the attainment of all of our young people and children and young people, recognising the challenges that so many face to learning and ensuring that the measures are in place to create the environments within which they can learn and flourish has been a key objective for this committee over the past years. Closing the poverty-related attainment gap has been something we've heard so much about, and members will note in the report that we have seen narrowing in terms of various stages, including P1s meeting developmental milestones and staying on rates as answered in questions for S4 pupils to S5, which has increased to 88%. But as section 2.2 of the report highlights, there remain real challenges at different stages as measured. These stubborn inequalities, many of which will have been compounded by the pandemic, remain a key focus for all of us. We note the successes outlined in the paper and thank all of those who work with our children, young people and families across Perth and Kinross. And I'm sure we all commit ourselves to doing more to support those who face real hardship so we can keep raising our attainment levels for all. I'll ask Councillor Duff if he'll second the report.
Thank you, Convener. Attainment is an important issue for all of us, whether we are pupils, parents, teachers or employers. No matter how well our children are performing, I'm sure we want to see them all strive for educational excellence and achieve the best results possible. To support this, we want to minimise and remove, if possible, any barriers affecting their potential attainment levels. The report provides an update on attainment, many of which, given the circumstances, have been significantly impacted by school closures, remote learning and the cancellation of 2 years' worth of examinations. Pupil performance was affected considerably, with the poorest and more disadvantaged families suffering worst in many instances. Schools worked hard to support families in need and utilised their pupil equity funds well in a range of ways to provide that support. The report sets out in detail many examples of the interventions used, the additional staff who were employed, the existing staff who were upskilled, and the equipment and materials that were provided. The many case studies are extremely helpful in providing the background and outcomes to these activities. Convener, I welcome this report and I'm happy to second the conclusion and recommendations at section 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Can I ask if there's any comments on the report, please? Councillor Barrett.
Thanks again, Convener. The Scottish Government's Pupil Equity Fund has been very worthwhile. It's been very transformational and it's to be applauded. But any worthwhile and transformational policy will only be worthwhile and transformational if it's delivered effectively at the coalface. And I think, again, we need to commend our head teachers and our senior staff in schools who do, by and large, deliver pupil equity funding pretty effectively. We touched upon it earlier, at least I did, but I think it's important to note the role that PSAs and ECPs have in delivering pupil equity fund as well, because often they're the people that end up, you know, they're crucial in delivering it, and I think it's important that we recognise that. So again, it's just very briefly, it's just to commend our staff in Perth and Kinross who've been involved in delivering what's a very important and transformational policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I often wonder if I'm sure all our teachers and staff in schools have got plenty else to do than sit and watch the Lifelong Learning Committee on catch up. But you know, there's every single meeting over the last couple of years, I think, you know, we have reiterated that gratitude to staff across the service, and I do hope that and perhaps Mrs Macaulay and Mrs Weston can take that back to the staff, that, you know, cross party across the chamber, we all are incredibly grateful for the efforts that staff make.
Absolutely, it's not just ticking a box either. I know it's genuinely helpful from me, and I know you genuinely mean it as well, so it's important that we note that. Thanks.
Thank you, and note Sheena's comment. So with that, if there's if we're all agreed, can we agree the report, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. I will now, before my voice gives up completely, hand over to the Vice Convener to take the next paper.
Thank you, Convener. Okay, members, we move on to item 6, the Learning Estate Strategy and Learning Estate Management Plan, and invite Sheena Devlin to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Convener. This report is an updated Learning Estate Strategy and Learning Estate Management Plan. It is based on the principles within the National Learning Estate Strategy, which was published in September 2019. There is an aspiration that these principles are adopted across different sectors, allowing for a joined-up approach to the management of the learning estate across Scotland. The report notes that there is a significant alignment with the principles in how we manage our estate, and there are, however, improvement actions which we've included in the management plan section. The plan gives an overview of key actions which will continue to deliver the strategy, and these actions are primarily based around the transformation programme, the capital programme and asset management. This plan will be up for revision every 3 years. Thank you. Happy to take any questions, and we've got a range of colleagues from within our service and other services able to answer questions.
Thank you, Sheena. First question comes from Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I have a question on the Learning Estate Strategy paper. This is page 116, where I note that it says that the estate needs to be fit for purpose, that it needs to be managed in an efficient and effective manner, which we'd all agree with, and provide the best value and benefits to our community. And I wonder perhaps if we get some further information on how we go about achieving that. How do we make it available to our communities? It's a wonderful asset with splendid facilities that lies empty most of the time when we're not using it during term time. And I hope that we could perhaps either get some receipts from it or let it out. I mean, there are a range of things we could be using our premises for, be it summer schools, birthdays, parties, bar mitzvahs, Diwali celebrations. There's all manner of things could be going on. And there is sometimes a feeling in the community, the school's for the school and not for their use. And I wonder perhaps if we can get an idea of what actions we're taking to, in effect, sweat our assets.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I'll begin that answer if I may, and then I'll ask Greg Boland to come in, if that's okay. You're absolutely right, Councillor Simpson. These are important assets, not just from the point of view that's where the quality educational provision that we've spoken about earlier on in this committee happens from a lot of the time, but also in terms of the built facility that they're able to provide for other purposes. I would want to reassure committee members, however, that we do currently use a range of our schools in a whole load of different ways outside of learning time, at weekends, in the evenings and over holiday periods. What people may be feeling quite acutely at present, of course, is that has been very restricted because of the current situation. And I say the current situation, I think we're something like 590 odd days into the pandemic. So over the past 500 and however, 90 odd days, we have had to comply quite rightly with very different guidance around access to all parts of the built estate across the council. And so people might be feeling that quite acutely at present. But for example, we do actually have a policy about the use of campuses, for example, in relation to hiring for parties. And we have had birthdays and weddings and a whole load of other celebrations happen in a range of these buildings, and they are available for that use. And as soon as restrictions permit, then we'll see all of that happening again. Of course, in using these assets, it's not just simply a case of opening the doors, and I know that you know this, and letting people in, that we have the actual facility management to consider of that, and that all comes at a cost as well. However, having said all of that, if I could just draw committee's attention to part of the recently agreed and approved investment blueprint, which we don't have that paper here today, but which our learning estate strategy absolutely coheres with. In the investment blueprint, you'll remember that that's set out in a series of challenges and a series of, and here's how we'll meet those challenges. So the challenge is that our assets are currently used predominantly by council staff to deliver council services. And I'm taking this away just from schools to the whole of the council estate. So we need to rationalise our overall property estate to reduce costs and deliver more integrated ways of working with our communities and our partners. That's the challenge. The we wills, so the intention is quite clear, utilise local place plan tools such as the place standard to better understand the assets that are available within each community. And it's important that what we're not thinking here is that every school building will suddenly be able to be opened for use at all times, but we are keen to understand in each community what are the council buildings that are available that could be used differently. Any gaps in provision and the outcomes of our community's need and want we will look at as well. And to support this approach, an asset sharing protocol will be developed with communities and partners to realise the greatest benefit from our investments and assets. And further, we will invest and enable community asset transfers to give greater control and influence to our communities. So I hope, Councillor Simpson, that gives you some solid reassurance that actually the learning estate strategy and the investment blueprint that were agreed are two sides of the same coin, and that we will be working alongside colleagues in other parts of council services to ensure that we can develop further how all council assets are able to be used more widely and more frequently by our communities. Thank you. And Greg may well have other specifics to answer there, but I think the important thing is linking this strategy and the investment blueprint.
So Councillor Simpson, yeah, just I think you've had a full comprehensive response from Sheena. I suppose it's just part of that, as we've kind of discussed, the blueprint, the learning estate strategies is fundamental, but in paragraph 2.4 of the committee report, we've talked about our improvement actions, and that's what we'll be looking to do, is to have a place-based collaborative approach with our communities about using assets, and not only their schools, but as Sheena said, the kind of wider council assets to improve community access across Perth and Kinross. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that was a fairly full answer to the question. I'll move on now to Councillor Sarwar, please.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Actually, my question was pretty much very similar to what Councillor Simpson has just asked, so I'm not sure that there's much more we can get out of it, but I just wanted a bit of clarity about, you know, the current, how our schools have been used. So are you saying that they were open to community groups? Because my understanding was that had been, yeah. So I'm just wondering whether, is that something that we're looking at as well going forward? And I'll leave my other kind of, I've got a very local question. I'm trying to get a meeting specifically on this for Cooper Angus, because that's something we're trying to look at with the town hall and how the school could maybe replace some of that function. So I'm just looking at the kind of the community group angle, really.
So just for clarification, Councillor Sarwar, when I was saying no, I'm talking about no in the past 20 months or so, but because of restrictions in relation to health and safety measures and mitigations. But yes, is the answer, in particularly in some locations around community use in a number of our schools. That is something that has been a feature for a number of years. But we are keen to look to see how we can extend that further, as I just articulated there in the previous answer, and that's something that we're very keen to do and engage with our communities to understand what are their needs and what might actually be the best place for them to operate from, depending on what the kind of activities were. And you're right, in Cooper Angus and other areas round about there's been discussions for a while about different groups using the school buildings at different times, and that's definitely something that we would want to continue to explore further. So yes, there has been community use of schools over a long period of time. It may not have happened in every school over the piece, and it certainly wouldn't have been happening of late, and that was where I was saying I think people are feeling things quite acutely because of the longevity of some of the restrictions that we've experienced. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Councillor Sarwar, thank you for that. We'll move on to Councillor Barrett, please.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. My question is also related to sections 2.4 and the Learning Estate Management Plan. Section 5 of the plan sets out the actions that are planned, but I just wanted you to please confirm that all of these actions are actually subject to review against the points in section 2.4 about the consultative approach and place, the investment blueprint, the climate emergency and outdoor learning, all of which I think we're all agreed are really important going forward. So it was just really to check that of the items set out in section 5, they really are all subject to review against those parameters. Thank you.
I'll ask Greg or Carol to come in and confirm that, but my understanding is that that is the case, Councillor Barrett.
Yes, so Councillor Barrett, just to confirm, as Sheena said, yes, that's 100% accurate. Yeah, that's what we'll be doing. Yep.
Okay, thank you for that.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, please.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. Probably no surprise to you, I'm going to ask a question on 2.8 about Dunbarney and the current capacity at 207 increased to 232. It probably has never reached 207 before because the children who live, some children who live in Bridgevern, Oudenarde are bused into Perth to school, so therefore they're not being schooled in Bridgevern. I'm a real concern because lots of houses being planned to be built in Bridgevern within the next couple of years, and the school capacity is just not going to be able to cope. So I'm just wondering what the thoughts are about the future. Thank you.
Councillor Baird, you'll know that's a school close to my heart, but I will ask Carol or Karen to come in, and I think it will be Carol that will be able to answer that question for you. Thank you.
Councillor Baird, as you're aware, we do monitor house building very closely, and at this point we are not anticipating that the role will breach at Dunbarney. Obviously that's one of the reasons that we've increased the capacity of the school, as over recent years the role has continued to be relatively stable and I suppose high, and some of those pupils are coming in from the new house building already. I think Karen may be able to respond in relation to what we might do in relation to admission policies if there were any issues in relation to the school role.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, Councillor Baird, you'll be aware from your attendance on appeal committees of what our council admission policy is, and the statement that is contained within that policy that says there is no living in a catchment area may not guarantee a place at a school. And our recently revised over the past couple of years admissions policy quite clearly sets out the categories for priority should there be any instances of an overcapacity situation in terms of how these will be prioritised. You are correct in what you have said in relation to the children at Oudenarde. They are currently zoned to a school in Perth and don't fall within the catchment area for Dunbarney Primary School, but we have a strategy in place that we would manage that should that be necessary at any point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further requests for questions, so I will move on to move the report. The quality and management of our learning estate is an important component in the delivery of our educational excellence. It is therefore vital that we have in place a learning estate strategy and a management plan which set out how we will plan, maintain and use our physical assets to best effect for our children and young people and our communities more generally. As members will be aware, our learning estate represents approximately 80% of the Council's entire property assets, and we will invest a further £160 million of capital in this area over the next few years. Our most recent school estate strategy dates from 2012 and was due an overhaul. In line with this, a new national learning estate strategy, Connecting People, Places and Learning, has been developed by the Scottish Government and COSLA and will be used to shape joined up investment planning and prioritisation across the Scottish learning estate. The new PKC learning estate strategy before us today was developed in line with the principles of the national strategy and will provide a framework by which we can deliver schools which enhance the learning experience and make a difference to our communities. These principles include encouraging place-based collaborative consultation approach, revising our existing plans based on a recently agreed 30-year investment or blueprint for investment, and helping us make further progress towards our low carbon targets. In that regard, our Learning Estate Management Plan will provide a mechanism to deliver the strategy and will be reviewed every 3 years. Paragraph 2.9 highlights the additional factors which will now drive investment in our learning estate over and above condition, suitability and occupancy, and these include local place plans, the Perth and Kinross offer and the corporate capital investment blueprint. As noted at paragraph 3.4, the management plan will be further adapted following the Council's decision last month to approve the 30-year capital investment blueprint. Work on the blueprint will help us to identify our future investment priorities and establish a more transparent approach to our capital investment decision-making process. Consequently, we will pause the current school estate transformation programme on completion of phase 2 to allow for that work to be undertaken. The Learning Estate Management Plan will thereafter be fully aligned with the Capital Investment Plan and the future School Estate Transformation Programme. And the future School Estate Transformation Programme will stem from our investment blueprint decisions. In addition to the strategy and the plan, the paper also seeks approval to amend the capacity at 4 of our schools, the details of which are listed at paragraph 2.8 for members' information. The Learning Estate and Management Plan are a significant development towards ensuring that we continue the excellent work undertaken so far in delivering a school estate which is fit for purpose and provides our pupils and staff with the very best set of learning environments. I'm happy to move the paper. Could I ask Councillor Shires to second the report?
Thank you. I'm very happy to second this paper. Our school estate has evolved and changed considerably in the period since I was first elected in 2007, with many millions invested in our schools and other community facilities. Members will note £81 million has been invested since 2015-16, and over the period 2021 to 29, there'll be a further £160 million invested. In recent weeks, we as a council have committed to an investment blueprint. The principles of that blueprint and how we sweat our assets over the coming years to ensure we truly create buildings and resources that meet the needs of our community will be a challenge which I'm sure we'll all embrace. How our capital investment fits with the Perth and Kinross offer and is responsive to the changing needs of our communities, as outlined in section 2.12 of the report, will be key. Section 2.13 outlines the key actions in the Learning Estate Management Plan and the ongoing commitment to investing in the facilities our communities need most. These are exciting projects being built to the highest possible environmental standards, and I look forward to seeing those projects delivered. As we covered during questions, I also look forward to, under the Perth and Kinross offer, a move to our schools being at the heart of our communities, but not just as places to teach our children and young people, but as community facilities where buildings and grounds are accessible to all in the communities outside of school hours. And we see more of a move to 365 facilities. This is especially important in our rural communities, and the paper outlines opportunities and challenges to ensure that we upgrade our estate so that our children and young people can learn in the very best facilities possible. This is something we've not shied away from as an administration, and it is fantastic to see new facilities in, just to pick a few, St Ninians, Logie, Rattray, and work ongoing in our primary and secondary estate across Perth and Kinross. Happy to second the paper, Vice Convener.
Thank you, Convener. Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Vice Convener. If I'm allowed just a quick moment of parochialism, I just wanted to say that I welcome what I think is a very sensible change for the Cooper Angus Primary School capacity. It is welcome that we've had the expansion of the nursery for 1140 hours, and when COVID restrictions ease enough, I can't wait to have a tour around. And just to say also how great it is to have the expanded use for the ASN and what an important part it is of our local school. And just this reduced capacity, I hope, will help protect the future of the school, as it's obviously an old building. Those that will know, it is very large, and we don't always have we're nowhere near full capacity role. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sarwar. Councillor Rebeck.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I think colleagues here today are absolutely correct. Whilst our schools need to be places of excellence and learning, they need to benefit the whole population of Perth and Kinross at the same time, whether they're officially campuses or not. They need to be community assets, every single one of them. Young adults, school kids and the community generally need to feel a sense of ownership with their school. They need to have a positive view on their school, and that will benefit the whole community as well as it will benefit our young learners in the schools. We need to put our money where our mouth is as well, though, even more probably than we already do. And I will continue to press colleagues in the SNP group for extra money in the school estate management programme as we have done previously. But the report is good and it's to be commended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebeck. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Vice Convener. It almost goes without saying that this is yet another excellent paper from officers, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't say it. So I think we should recognise that this is an excellent living document, I hope, because the learning estate itself is a constantly movable feast. And I hope that we will continue to updates as the new facilities come online, as new ideas and how to, as we keep saying, sweat our assets. And as perhaps COVID restrictions may ease, let's hope. So I hope that this will be a document that will come back to us to be refreshed and updated on as things go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor McCall.
Yes, another excellent report, and I'm not going to repeat what other councillors have said. I'm actually going to make an appeal to our councillors. Part of the issue is that many of our communities see school as school, and as soon as they leave, that's the last time they want to darken the door again. We have every opportunity at every community group we go to, and every opportunity to highlight the benefits of our school estate, of what can be done, of what they can use to attend the libraries, to go in and utilise the facilities that are there. We have an obligation, as much as our officers, to change the attitude of the communities towards our school estates, and I'm challenging the rest of the councillors to maybe do a little bit more when they're out there in the community. Thank you.
Okay, I'm seeing no more requests for comments. Thank you all who have commented on the paper. Can we agree this paper?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Given the time, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess, and if everybody could be back in their seat when the bell rings at 10:55, please, we'll continue with the other papers. Thank you. Sorry, Sheena, if you're speaking, you're on mute. Are you? I'm being told it's myself it's on mute. Have you? Is anybody hearing me?
Yep, hearing you.
Okay, thank you.
Loud and clear, John.
Okay, thank you. Let's start that one again. Okay, we'll move to item 7, dual catchment area for Kirkmichael Primary School, and I'll invite Sheena Devlin to introduce this report.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. A scoping exercise has been undertaken at the request of Lifelong Learning Committee on the possibility of making Kirkmichael Primary School catchment area a dual catchment one for both Blairgowrie High School and Pitlochry High School. The purpose of creating a dual catchment area would be to help create a sustainable increase in the school role at Pitlochry High. As part of the exercise, a survey was undertaken to establish the views of parents carers of primary school age pupils currently attending Kirkmichael. The conclusion of the report is that based on the survey responses, establishing a dual catchment for Kirkmichael Primary School is unlikely to significantly increase the school role at Pitlochry at this time. This work has also shown that there is the potential for detriment to Blairgowrie High School through an incremental reduction in staffing should large numbers of pupils from Kirkmichael elect to attend Pitlochry as a result of dual catchment arrangements. There are also substantial additional costs and resources to establish and maintain new school transport routes associated with pupils travelling to Pitlochry from Kirkmichael Primary School catchment area. Vice Convener, there are a range of officers from different services across parts of the council here who will be able to answer any questions that elected members may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor McCall, please.
Thank you, Vice Convener. It's just a general question. Can you just confirm that there's still the ability to do placing requests for Pitlochry if that was required? And based on current situation, does it look like the occupancy would be able to accommodate that?
It's still absolutely an option for placing requests to be made to Pitlochry High School. And yes, there would be very likely space to accommodate any such placing requests, Councillor McCall. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm not going to switch my camera on at the moment because I've got very poor signal, if that's okay. I've got a couple of questions. Do you want me to ask the first one and then come back to me? Or
yes, I'll just take one at this point in time, Councillor McDade. I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you. Do we know where the 20 children of the 12 families, do we know whereabouts in the Kirkmichael catchment those children are mostly based? Are they mostly based in Kirkmichael village and to the west, or are they spread all over the catchment? Do we have, I don't know if maybe Carol Gareth or someone who's involved with the detailed review might be able to give us detail on that.
Vice Convener, that's not detail I have, but Carol Taylor may be able to give an indication. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Councillor McDade, they are generally based in the west, Enoch Do, I think, and some within Kirkmichael itself.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Convener. I just have a question. I'm really looking at on page 195, and if it has the estimated travel times. Colleagues may know I'm a very poor, I suffer from travel sickness, and the thought of spending 2 hours a day in a coach going across the hills, it fills me with dread. I'm feeling quite queasy sitting at my desk. Can I ask, are there any facilities ordinarily on school transport for our young people to access any other learning opportunities while they're sitting there trying not to throw up in the bus?
Can I ask you to give me a for instance, Councillor Simpson, if that's...
Well, I just wondered if they are able to have Wi-Fi access, if there are any exercises or work they could be doing on the bus to make use of that time. It's a terrible waste of time, it would occur to me. If 4 hours a day in a coach, if they're not able to do some learning, if we're not able to at least encourage them to undertake some learning.
I think it would be for individual young people to choose how they wanted to spend any travel time. For some young people, participation in any kind of activity that may involve reading or may in fact not be an appropriate thing for them to do. So it would really be for individual young people to be thinking about how it was that they might want to spend that time. Some of that would be talking to their friends, but I don't think it's something that we would actually stipulate. In terms of whether Wi-Fi is available on school transport, I know that Murray Fraser is here with us today, and Murray would be able to let us know whether that's the case or not. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson, yeah, no, Wi-Fi isn't something that we insist on our council contracts. I know some of the larger operators do provide that provision, but it's not something that we have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rebeck, please.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I think before I ask this question, it's really important to say that I recognise all the hard work that's gone into this report, and it's appreciated with all the other things that Carol and her team have got to do. I'm sure they could have done without this, so the work's appreciated. However, it does strike me that we asked parents a lot of questions, quite rightly, and then we've been offered a kind of option here, but the questions that we ask the parents don't directly relate to the options that we've come up with, and I'm just wondering if in future it's possible to trust parents, I guess, with the options that councillors and elected members are going to be faced with. If there's a more direct correlation, that might have been better, but like I say, there's no implied criticism here. The work's really appreciated. Thanks.
Sheena, do you want to respond to that?
I'll ask Carol or Greg to come in relation to the questions. Councillor Rebeck, if I'm picking you up correctly, is your question why was there not greater correlation between what was asked parents and the options in the options appraisal?
Yes, I think that. Thank you, Sheena. I think that probably was what I was asking.
I just wanted to check. Thank you. So
trying not to sound too critical, but that is indeed what I'm asking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if I could ask Carol or Greg to come in on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheena. I'll respond to that one. Councillor Rebeck, what we were trying to do was determine whether we could increase the role at Pitlochry High School, and I think by asking parents if they wanted a dual catchment, that wouldn't have given us that response. I think if parents are asked if they wanted a dual catchment, the answer from everyone would have been yes, but we still wouldn't have had we still wouldn't have known who would have sent their children to Pitlochry and who would have sent their children to Blairgowrie. So essentially we were trying to see how we could increase the role of Pitlochry High School, and that's why we asked the questions that we asked. I don't know if you have a supplementary question or if that did answer your question.
No, that does. That's understood, Carol. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Come back to Councillor McDade for his second question. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Vice Convener. Yeah, I just want to query a bit about the conclusions of the report. So in the introduction, it was sort of indicated that there wouldn't be this was about creating a sustainable role for Pitlochry, and the threshold that was used in the school estate review was 60%. Now, Pitlochry, under the current predictions and its current catchment, hits that in 1 year of the years that are listed in the papers, 27-28. But if the children whose parents have expressed that they would like to send their children to Pitlochry if they were able to, that then comes within 1 or 2% in 3 of those years and exceeds it in a further 2 years. So in 5 years, it effectively is hitting close to or at or over 60%. So given that we have determined that we feel 60% is sort of our magic threshold, I just want to understand a bit more about why we don't feel that this doesn't help achieve that, creating a sustainable role, since we've decided 60% is a sustainable role.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McDade. Who would like to take this question?
I would
Carol?
like to respond to that question.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I suppose that one of the objectives of the report was to increase the role at Pitlochry High School, but what we had to consider all of the other variables. And I think the conclusion relates to all the variables and not just to Pitlochry High School role. It relates to the potential detriment at Blairgowrie High School and the costs related to winter maintenance and to transport. So I suppose that is the answer to the question. I think that we are likely to reduce the capacity of the school at Pitlochry High School when we complete the works for the college. And I think that the community themselves were confident that the dualling of the A9 would increase the population in Highland Perthshire. So I suppose what we'd be looking at is just to see what happens. But I suppose it's about the whole and not just about the role of the school.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Councillor Forbes, please.
Thank you. Right at the start of this session, I think Sheena talked about this principle of no detriment and the potential that a dual catchment may have an impact on Blairgowrie. Can you just outline what that impact might be, Sheena, please?
I think you may be on mute, Sheena, if it's yourself that's trying to respond.
Councillor Duff, apologies. I had a drop in connection there, and so Councillor Forbes, I couldn't hear your question. Would you mind repeating your question, please?
Yeah, of course, no problem. At the opening of this, you talked about the principle of no detriment, and I think you suggested the dual catchment area may have some kind of detriment to Blairgowrie. Are you able to expand on what that might be?
In general terms, Councillor Forbes, if there's a reduction in the role over time at Blairgowrie, that would have an impact on the staffing complement, for example, that would go to that school, and so on and so forth. And so that there would be detriment to the school in terms of the staffing allocation, for example.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions in relation to this paper? I'll give it a wee moment or two. Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any requests for further questions, therefore I will move the paper. As part of the approved outcomes for Pitlochry High School, which we discussed back in September 2019, we agreed to undertake a scoping exercise on whether the Kirkmichael Primary School catchment area should be made into a dual secondary school catchment area. Such a move would allow pupils to attend either Blairgowrie High School or Pitlochry High School and Breadalbin Academy for their senior school education. It is important to note that even without a catchment change, the school role at Pitlochry High School is predicted to increase from the current 117 pupils to around 140 pupils within the next few years. Along with the work ongoing in relation to the Highland Perthshire Learning Partnership and our investment in the building and community facilities, the future of Pitlochry High School is secure. It is also important to stress that families can at present seek a placing request to allow their children to attend Pitlochry High School, and that facility would continue even if no changes to the catchment area are recommended. A survey of parents and carers indicated that potentially 12 families with 23 children may consider sending their children to Pitlochry. Taking age ranges into consideration, this could result in a maximum of 11 additional pupils attending Pitlochry over the next 6 years. Further potential scenarios have been considered, and these are set out in tables 6 and 7 and in Appendix A. Analysis of these scenarios show that the establishment of a dual catchment area could result in outcomes which are detrimental to the role and occupancy levels at Blairgowrie High School and could lead to an incremental staffing reduction at the school. The principle of no detriment was established earlier in the review of Pitlochry High School in respect of its relationship with Breadalbin Academy Secondary School and should still apply here. Further impacts in relation to transport, travel distances and journey times, travel routes and severe weather events and extracurricular activities are also set out. The report also details the potential financial and resource impacts, which are not inconsiderable. Significant cost pressures in the region of £200,000 per annum would arise from a requirement to add the A924 over Moor to the priority road network for school transport during severe winter conditions. A helpful summary of the conclusions of establishing a dual catchment area is contained at paragraph 7.2. In conclusion, the recommended course of action in the circumstances is the retention of the existing arrangements between Kirkmichael Primary School and Blairgowrie High School. I'm happy to move the paper. Could I ask the convener to second the report, please?
Thank you, Councillor Duff. First and foremost, I'm delighted that this committee has agreed that the future of Pitlochry High School is secure and that there has been consensus on this from across the council. We've invested in taking forward the Highland Perthshire Learning Partnership and in the development of community facilities within the school for the future. I think that's all very positive and we'll certainly commit to continuing that work over the coming years. Ironically, Highland Perthshire Learning Partnership is now the model that we developed across education as a result of the pandemic, and I hope we will see it really expand the offer of options and course choices for young people in the years to come. Turning to the paper before us today, the scoping exercise was to consider if creating a dual catchment for Kirkmichael Primary School would increase the school role at Pitlochry High School. Members will note in the report that the role at Pitlochry, as the Vice Convener has outlined, is set to increase without the introduction of that dual catchment. Of those families who did respond saying they would consider sending their children to Pitlochry, they would of course still have the option to submit a placing request. And as an elected member for this ward, I know that traditionally some parents from west of Kirkmichael have opted to do this over the years, and I would expect that to continue. I also know, as a member of Mount Blair Community Development Trust, that work is underway to look at establishing better transport links between Kirkmichael and other communities. The links between Mount Blair and Blairgowrie will hopefully be improved, and there will be work done to look at improving links with Pitlochry also. The extensive work being done to develop the digital offer through the Highland Perthshire Learning Partnership and Perth College may improve opportunities for the community to access learning opportunities in Pitlochry for school leavers and others, and those are links that we will want to explore. I thank those in the community who have responded to the surveys from council officers, and I thank all the officers for their time in preparing this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I have a couple of comments. If anybody else wishes to put a say in the chat, do so now, please. First comment from Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I think it's unfortunate that we are going to ignore the preference of the parents and children whose views we asked. It seems a bit pointless to ask them for their opinions and then ignore their desired preference. And whilst anyone can put a placing request in, not all parents have the luxury of being able to transport their children to school every day. Many will have work commitments and other childcare commitments that will prevent them from doing that. It is not the same as being in the catchment and the council providing the transport. I think that there is nothing here in terms of the reduction that would be in the case of Blairgowrie and the transport costs that members of this committee didn't know when they unanimously agreed that we should undertake this scoping exercise. So there is nothing there that we did not know several years ago when we commissioned this work, and therefore I'm slightly confused that we are now using that as our justification for not proceeding to explore a dual catchment based on the fact that there is a significant number of parents and children who do wish to send their children to Pitlochry as their preference. And I think I would like to seek assurance from the convener and the vice convener, and indeed Councillor Rebeck as his representative of his party, that Pitlochry, under their leadership of this committee in the future, will not be put into any review where it would meet the threshold of 60% had it had an extension of its catchment. Essentially, the paper would increase the school roll potentially by 7%. So if it falls below some magic threshold by something around that number, that they will not include it in a future review, given they have committed that it is secure for the future, and that we are not taking this opportunity to provide that security. So I would like to seek that assurance from them at this point. If that could perhaps be forthcoming, I would be very grateful, and I think the community of Pitlochry would be very grateful as well to have that assurance, given what we've all been through over the past few years.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McDade. Certainly, I think the convener and I both mentioned in the comments that we made in moving and seconding the paper that the future of Pitlochry High School was secure. And I think, as I mentioned in the previous paper about the new learning estate strategy, that there will be changes to the school estate transformation programme that will come about as a result of our decisions on the 30-year investment blueprint. So we will have an opportunity to look at and review the principles, if you like, for future school estate transformation work going forward once we've done that work on the investment blueprint. And I hope that provides you with the assurance that you're looking for. Councillor Simpson, please.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm not sure we're all looking at the same paper here. I thought this was an excellently well thought out paper, and I could find no disagreement with the recommendations of 7.4. Colleagues will know that I normally don't miss an opportunity to bang on about active travel, but even I recognise that cycling from Kirkmichael to and from Blairgowrie or Pitlochry is more of an Ironman challenge than an everyday school transport challenge. But I do worry a little bit about our young people who are sitting around in buses and taxis for long periods, and hope that the schools do have, as part of their active travel plans, an opportunity for these young people to take some exercise in the course of the day, or to do something to make up for the fact they've had to sit around for such long periods. And perhaps we can incorporate that into the travel plan, some sort of fitness regime, which is probably not overly popular with some of the young people, but I think just to put them in a bus door to door is not the best way. And perhaps we could look at perhaps cycling or walking to the bus stop or back, some sort of safe way of doing that, so they get some exercise in the course of the day and are not just sitting around in a bus or a taxi.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor McCall, please.
Thank you, Vice Convener. It's just a quick comment. I think change for change's sake is something that always worries me slightly. I think it's important that we do the proper consultation, and that came across in the paper quite properly and well, that we do have to engage with the community and ask the questions, but then we get to the stage where you actually have to take everything into the round. And detriment to other areas is something that I just don't agree with. Just because we want to make a difference to one doesn't mean we should make it worse for another. I think that's very well put out in the paper, and I agree wholeheartedly with the conclusions that it come up with, and I just wanted to make a comment.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Rebeck, please.
Thanks again, Vice Convener. Yeah, I totally understand why the honourable intentions of trying to help one school's role may detriment another. We've been here before, and so maybe somewhat reluctantly, actually, I will approve the recommendations in the paper. I think, however, it's important to note a couple of things. I think, first of all, that the support for Kirkmichael parents that did indicate they wanted to go to Pitlochry High School, I think that should be recognised. I think we need to help them further, not just in terms of allowing them to make a placement request. We need to do something else for them. I confess at this point I have no idea what that would be, and therefore that's not helpful, but I don't think it should be the end of the matter for them, albeit I think it is the end of the matter for a formal catchment review change because of the reasons of detriment that colleagues have already underlined. And I think it's very important to note that Councillor McDade is absolutely right, that I think we do need to move away from this arbitrary figure around capacity, particularly in light of the last paper, where we're saying, and we need to put this into action, that schools and places of learning need to be community assets. And as I say, Councillor McDade's absolutely right. We need to get away from this arbitrary figure of capacity as an issue. It shouldn't be, and that's my position on it. I'm not, unfortunately, whether I'm here after May 22 in direct answer to his questions, not in my hands. It's in the hands of the fine people of St Johnstone branch of the SNP and the even finer people of Perth City North. But if I am here after May 22, then Councillor McDade has my reassurance. If I'm in any position of influence at all, then Pitlochry High School, Pitlochry School, Primary School and High School is already a community asset in Pitlochry, and it should remain so forever. If I'm in any position of influence, I will do my best to make sure that continues forever, as I say. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Councillor Rebick. Last comment then from Councillor Forbes, please.
Thanks for that. I was just simply going to reiterate what you and the convener had already said for the benefit of Councillor McDade, but I think you outlined it pretty well in your summing up there, Vice Convener. So I will just leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the request for comments in this paper. Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I now hand back to the convener for the final item on the agenda?
Vice Convener, can I have my dissent recorded, please?
Of course you can, Councillor McDade. I'm sure the clerk will record that. I'll hand back to the convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. That takes us on to the final paper of today, which is paper 8, the Community Learning and Development Plan 2021 to 24. And I'll ask the Executive Director to start off, and then I believe that Fiona Robertson will be brought in after that.
Thank you very much, Convener. In introducing this report, I would like to inform committee that Education Scotland holds the statutory inspection and regulatory role for community learning and development in Scotland. Under the 2013 regulations, councils must prepare and publish a 3-year community learning and development plan, setting out strategic aims for community learning and development services and functions delivered by all community planning partners. The previous plan covered the years 2019 to 2021, and this report provides an overview of key achievements and performance during that period. The new plan covers 21 to 24 and sets out the clear strategic direction and priorities for the next 3 years, with a particular focus on the first 12 months to support our communities in the recovery from the impact of COVID-19. Arrangements for governance and leadership worthy of note in this model of distributed leadership that has been adopted in Perth and Kinross, and measuring the impact of the actions set out via an updated performance framework are all described within this plan. Fiona Robertson and David Stoko are here from communities, and there are a range of officers from within Education and Children's Services also available to pick up on any questions, queries that any elected members may have. Thank you very much, Convener.
Thank you very much for that. Can I ask if there are any questions on the report? Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much indeed, Convener. I have a question on page relating to page 229 and community groups and asset transfers. I just wonder if, in general, if we have assets that we feel would benefit from this, is there any possibility of having a sort of ready-to-go offer to make to communities? The reason I suggest this is, and it's highlighted in the report, that sometimes when you're dealing, for instance, with like a playgroup committee or something of this nature, because children have a tendency to grow up and leave and go and do other things, the committee is an ever-changing committee. and I've been involved in the past. And the time we get things going, the kids have moved on, the committee's changed, you go back and start again and get involved in a sort of Groundhog Day situation. And I just wondered if there was a possibility, if we identified assets that we felt would benefit from transfer, if we could get some sort of ready-to-go offer to make to people, rather than always seeming to start from scratch again.
It's a very good point. One for you, Fiona.
Thank you, Convener. Thanks for the question, Councillor Simpson. I mean, you're absolutely right. We do report separately to Council annually on community asset transfers. I think it's fair to say that our progress with this has been patchy in recent years. It can be a complicated process, but I think there is more that we can be doing. However, there are some caveats to that in terms of having really honest discussions, I think, with communities at an early stage about what it means to either take on the ownership or just the management through lease of a local asset, and to make sure that that really works for the community in the long term. We have several discussions underway in relation to local assets across Perth and Kinross at the moment. There are examples of other local authorities, Durham County Council as an example, down south, where there's been a very strong marketing push, if you like, around community asset transfer, and we have plans underway to do something similar in the year to come.
Councillor, did that answer your question, Councillor Simpson? Yep.
Yes, I'm happy to hear that there's progress with this, and obviously this will come back to this committee for us to see how it's going. But I think as long as we recognise the issue, I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. I've actually just discovered the answer to my question is hidden away in the small print somewhere else in the report when I was reading through it just a second ago, so withdraw my question. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no further questions, I will move the paper. Just find my notes again. This is an excellent piece of work which I'm very happy to propose to committee. As I outlined by Fiona in the briefing on community that we received last week, community learning and development is not seen as a service in itself, but as a function across services, and that is a really important distinction. I think all elected members will be well aware of the important contribution that community learning and development makes within our individual wards. I know that when COVID-19 struck last March, the well-established community links that John Corrigan and Mary Todd in particular had in East Perthshire very much came to the fore, and they were able to establish those vital connections between council services and the volunteers that ensured we were able to meet the needs of the most vulnerable in our communities. It was also exemplified in the work done around the COVID outbreak at the Two Sisters plant in Cwmbrangus. As we move onwards out of the pandemic, community learning and development will continue to evolve. We've seen a growing interest in our green spaces and play parks, family learning and parenting support, right through to the development of ways to reduce food waste through creative approaches in our communities, such as larders. The 2021-24 plan looks at developing on previous plans. At 3.1, it outlines the amazing work done with our partners, Adult Learning Partnership, the hugely important Youth Work Partnership, and Would Live Active Leisure. Empowering our communities and working with them underpins this plan. I would like to thank all those across Perth and Kinross Council who've worked so hard to ensure community learning and development is embedded in all our services. The work carried out during COVID was humbling to see, and as we build on the Perth and Kinross offer, it's exciting to see where community learning and development will go in the future. I ask the Vice Convener to second the report, please.
Thank you, Convener. I welcome this extremely interesting report and would like to thank officers for the very informative and helpful briefing which they facilitated a few days ago. Members will recognise that the COVID pandemic has significantly increased the inequalities faced by certain sections of our communities, particularly our most vulnerable adults, families and children, and the proposal to focus the Community Learning and Development Plan on addressing these inequalities, at least in year one, is the right approach. Community learning and development is embedded across council services and those of our community planning partners. It is founded on the principle that prevention is better than cure and works across all community planning partnership services to improve the lot of people and communities using early interventions and prevention techniques to address the root causes of these inequalities. Convener, this plan contains a wealth of detail on Perth and Kinross, including many interesting statistics and a wide variety of good examples of community learning and development and partnership working, and I'm delighted to second the report's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Can I ask if there's any comments on the report? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to thank the CLD team for this plan and for the briefing, which was very helpful, and thank them for all their flexibility and everything they've done during the challenges of COVID. We've seen across lifelong learning the significant achievements in supporting young people and adult learners, and I'd just like to say that having been involved with CLD on some of the COVID food support initiatives, their support was very much appreciated, and also helped us to build relationships within communities and across organisations, which was great. I warmly welcome the priorities in the report set out at 3.2 and the immediate focus on COVID recovery, and I'm sure we all look forward to working together with our communities to progress this plan. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Rebick.
Thanks, Convener. I'll just be very brief, and just to echo Councillor Barrett's comments there as well. I'm going to be parochial just very briefly. It was great to be involved with Leithen for All during the first period of COVID, particularly when we did a great job, I think, in helping people out in food poverty and many of the health and wellbeing issues that were around that as well. But I think in terms of community learning, I think Leithen for All have a huge place to play is what I'm trying to say. Moving forward, once the hub is fully refurbished, I think we will truly see the connection between our learning estate and community learning and development as well. So once again, thanks for this report. It's much appreciated, very positive, and it's to be commended. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Rebick and Councillor Barrett. If there's no further comments, can we agree this very excellent report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you, and that brings us to the end of today's meeting. Can I thank everyone for their participation, and particularly the officers for fulsome answering of quite a lot of questions, and for all the briefings that went on ahead of the meeting today, and for the ones that have been promised subsequent to this. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.